Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at Bitcoin and really kind of dig into why it might be a smart long-term investment.
Okay.
We're going to be focusing on an article that was written by Neil Patel for The Motley Fool,
All right.
and it was published on January 1st, 2025, so very recent.
Yeah, this is a fascinating piece. And one of the things that really stood out to me was this idea that Bitcoin is now being compared to major tech companies in terms of its value.
Right.
We're talking trillion-dollar valuations.
Yeah.
Even figures like former President Trump have come out and said, hey, I think Bitcoin's a good idea.
It's crazy.
So it's really interesting to see how the perception has changed.
Yeah, it really is remarkable how far Bitcoin has come.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when it was like this fringe thing, just
Yeah.
like tech enthusiasts and, a handful of investors were really into it, and it was easy to dismiss it as just like a fad.
Right.
But now Bitcoin's market cap has surged to like $1.9 trillion.
It's unbelievable. That puts it right up there with the Apples and the Amazons of the world.
Exactly. And I think part of this shift in perception is due to, the SEC's decision to finally approve Bitcoin ETFs in January 2024.
Huge.
That was a big deal because it opened the door for all these institutional investors who had previously been really hesitant to get into the crypto market.
Yeah.
So it provided a level of legitimacy and regulatory clarity that had been missing before.
Totally. It's like Bitcoin finally earned its seat at the table
Yeah.
alongside all the traditional assets.
Right.
And speaking of legitimacy, maybe the most unexpected development was former President Trump's endorsement of Bitcoin.
I know what you mean.
He gave the keynote speech at the Bitcoin conference.
Yeah.
And then he even proposed the idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the U.S.
It's interesting to think about, what the motivations behind that might be.
Yeah.
Was it, driven by a genuine belief in Bitcoin's potential as like a store of value or a hedge against inflation?
Right. Or was it more like a calculated strategy to maybe appeal to a specific demographic?
Yeah.
Or, challenge the existing financial system?
Right.
It's really fascinating to think about.
Yeah, it really does raise a lot of questions about how the political landscape is changing
Mm-hmm.
and how governments are viewing cryptocurrencies.
Absolutely. And it highlights something really crucial about Bitcoin that we need to kind of unpack, and that's its digital nature.
Okay.
So unlike physical assets like gold,
Right.
Bitcoin is borderless.
Hmm.
It's easily divisible, and it can be transferred almost instantly
Hmm.
with minimal fees.
Yeah,
And that makes it particularly relevant in today's world where everything's becoming more and more digital.
totally. I mean, think about it. We do almost everything online now.
Yeah.
Shopping, banking, socializing.
Uh-huh.
It only makes sense that our currencies would evolve to become more digital as well.
Precisely. We've seen this trend towards a digital economy gaining momentum for years now,
Mm-hmm.
with the rise of the internet, smartphones, and
Mhm.
now AI. Jack Dorsey, the former CEO of Block,
Yeah.
he famously said, the internet will have a native currency. It's just a matter of time.
And Bitcoin, with its decentralized nature and its global accessibility, seems like it could be that.
Right.
It's like the missing piece
Yeah,
in a world that's rapidly moving online.
totally agree. And this brings us to another important point that Patel makes in his article,
Okay.
and that's Bitcoin's inherent scarcity.
Right.
So only 21 million Bitcoins will ever exist,
Yeah.
which is a stark contrast to fiat currencies that can be printed endlessly by governments.
And this is where the concept of Bitcoin halving comes in.
Right, exactly.
Can you explain that to our listeners who might not be familiar?
So basically every 4 years or so, the reward that Bitcoin miners receive for validating transactions is cut in half.
Okay.
And this process is known as Bitcoin halving,
Mm-hmm.
and it's built into the Bitcoin protocol,
Right.
and it acts as a mechanism to control inflation.
So it's like a pre-programmed supply shock
Yeah, you could say that.
that gradually reduces the rate at which new Bitcoins are created,
Right.
which again, very different from the current monetary system where central banks can just increase the money supply whenever they want.
Exactly. And that often leads to devaluation and inflation.
Yeah, and that's a key reason why so many investors see Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation. It's a finite resource
Yeah.
in a world where fiat currencies are, increasingly being debased.
Right. And with governments around the world struggling with massive debts and resorting to money printing,
Yeah.
Bitcoin's appeal as a safe haven asset is likely to grow even stronger in the years to come.
Especially when you consider the fact that Bitcoin isn't controlled by any single entity or government.
Right.
It's truly decentralized,
Yeah,
which makes it resistant to censorship and manipulation.
exactly.
And that's a really powerful idea.
It is.
It resonates with people all over the world
Mhm.
who are seeking more control over their own finances
Yeah,
and a hedge against the uncertainties of the traditional financial system.
I agree.
It's like digital gold that you can just carry in your pocket.
And that's why it's captured the attention of so many people,
Right.
including like seasoned investors
Mhm.
and, even former presidents.
Yeah.
It represents like this fundamental challenge to how we think about money and finance,
Right.
and its long-term potential is only just beginning to be realized.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is.
It's interesting to think about how this digital gold, like you mentioned, is actually being used in the real world.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like beyond just being an investment,
Mm-hmm.
are there like practical applications for Bitcoin that are actually making a difference like today?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Bitcoin's ability to like facilitate fast, low-cost transactions across borders
Yeah.
has made it a lifeline for people in countries that have unstable currencies or limited access to financial services.
Right.
So they can use Bitcoin to, send and receive money without having to rely on traditional banking systems,
Yeah.
which might be unreliable or expensive.
It's like leveling the playing field
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Like giving everyone access to the same financial tools,
Yeah,
regardless of like where they live or their economic status.
exactly.
It's a powerful concept.
It is. And it's not just individuals who are benefiting.
Oh, really?
Businesses are also starting to embrace Bitcoin for cross-border payments,
Okay.
especially in industries with complex supply chains or where transaction fees can really eat into profits.
So it's like streamlining international commerce,
Yeah.
making it more efficient.
Exactly.
That's a big deal.
It is. And let's not forget about the potential for microtransactions,
Okay.
something that traditional payment systems often struggle with
Right.
because of high fees.
Mm.
Bitcoin can enable tiny payments, which opens up all sorts of possibilities for new business models and innovative applications.
Like what?
Well, think about, content creators getting paid fractions of a cent every time someone views their work,
Interesting.
or machines automatically paying each other for services rendered
Yeah.
in like a future Internet of Things.
That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is when you think about the possibilities.
Yeah.
It feels like we're on the verge of like a major shift
Hmm?
in how we think about money and how we interact with it.
Yeah, for sure.
And while it's impossible to predict the future, with certainty,
Right.
it's clear that Bitcoin is a force to be reckoned with.
Mm.
It's challenged a lot of long-held assumptions
Mm.
about the nature of money,
Yeah.
and its impact is being felt across all sorts of industries and aspects of our lives.
So let's go back to former President Trump's, surprising embrace of Bitcoin.
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that there could be all sorts of motivations behind his support.
Right.
So what are some of the potential implications of his stance,
Well,
particularly this idea of a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the U.S.?
yeah, on a practical level,
Yeah.
a U.S.-backed Bitcoin reserve could provide a degree of stability to the cryptocurrency market.
Okay.
It would signal that like a major world power sees value in Bitcoin and is willing to incorporate it into its financial strategy.
It would be a major legitimizing force,
Yeah.
not just for Bitcoin itself,
Right.
but for like the entire cryptocurrency ecosystem.
Exactly. And it could potentially reduce the volatility that we've seen
Mm.
associated with Bitcoin,
Yeah.
which would make it more attractive
Okay.
to like institutional investors and
Yeah.
everyday users.
But beyond like the practical implications, there's also like a symbolic dimension to this.
Right.
Like a strategic Bitcoin reserve would represent a huge shift in the way the U.S. government views money
Absolutely.
and its role in the global financial system.
It would be a bold move
Yeah.
that could challenge the dominance of the U.S. dollar.
Right.
And it would signal a willingness to embrace new technologies and new ideas.
Yeah.
It would be a major step towards like a more multipolar world
Okay.
where different forms of currency and different financial systems can coexist
Right.
and compete.
It's almost like a bet on the future, like a recognition that the traditional financial order is evolving
Mm-hmm.
and that the U.S. needs to adapt to stay ahead of the curve.
Right.
It's a fascinating development
It is.
and one that we'll definitely be watching closely in the years to come.
Absolutely. And speaking of keeping a close eye on things,
Yeah.
I think it's worth revisiting Neil Patel's article in The Motley Fool,
Okay.
which like sparked this whole discussion.
Yeah.
He makes a really compelling case for why Bitcoin could be a smart long-term investment.
Right.
even if future returns don't quite match the phenomenal gains we've seen in the past.
Okay.
He emphasizes Bitcoin's, growing legitimacy, its role in a digital economy,
Right.
and its inherent scarcity
Yeah.
as like key drivers of its long-term value proposition.
Yeah,
It's a really thoughtful analysis,
it is.
and I think it's worth a read for anyone who's serious about understanding the potential of Bitcoin.
I agree. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From Bitcoin's, surging market cap and these surprising endorsements
Yeah.
to its potential to like reshape global finance and empower individuals.
It's exciting stuff.
What stands out to you as like the most compelling reason to consider Bitcoin for the long term?
It's hard to pinpoint just one thing.
Right.
I think it's really the convergence of several factors.
Okay.
Like we have this revolutionary technology with
Yeah.
a fixed supply
Right.
that operates independently of any central authority.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we're seeing this global shift
Yeah.
towards digital economies
Colloid.
and a growing distrust of these like traditional financial institutions.
Right.
Bitcoin seems to be right at the intersection of those trends.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
It's like Bitcoin isn't just a new asset class.
Right.
It's like a potential solution
Yeah,
to some of the fundamental problems with the way our current financial system works.
exactly. And that's why I think even if the price of Bitcoin doesn't keep skyrocketing
Yeah.
at the same pace it has in the past, its underlying value proposition remains really strong.
I think that's a key takeaway for our listeners.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the hype
Uh-huh.
and the excitement around, Bitcoin's price movements.
Right.
But it's important to remember that this is still a relatively new technology.
Yeah,
It's evolving.
Yeah.
There will be ups and downs.
for sure.
But the long-term potential
Yeah,
is what's really compelling.
I totally agree. And as with any investment,
Yeah.
it's important to do your own research,
Right.
understand the risks involved,
Mhm.
and invest only what you can afford to lose.
Well said.
Yeah.
A big thank you to Neil Patel and the Motley Fool
Yeah, they're great.
for providing some really insightful analysis on Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this exploration
Yeah, thanks for listening, everybody.
of Bitcoin's potential as a long-term investment.
If the world keeps going down this path of like technological advancement and financial innovation, I think Bitcoin's place in the future is only going to become more prominent.
Yeah, for sure.
It's definitely something worth paying attention to.
Absolutely. And if this conversation has sparked your curiosity,
Yeah.
we encourage you to keep learning and exploring the world of Bitcoin.
Mm.
It's a fascinating space
It is.
with endless possibilities.
Yes. Who knows what the future holds?